Jake Miller wiped the sweat from his forehead and stared at the scanner display. Something was wrong. The numbers didn't make sense. He had been working in the asteroid belt for 15 years, and he knew what normal rocks looked like on his equipment. This was not normal. His ship, the Lucky Strike, floated next to a large asteroid marked XK7742 on his charts. Jake had come here looking for metal scraps and old ship parts. That's how he made his living. He would find broken pieces of spaceships, clean them up, and sell them to the big companies. It wasn't exciting work, but it paid for food and fuel. The scanner kept beeping. Jake tapped the screen with his finger. The machine showed metal deep inside the asteroid, but not just any metal. This metal had a pattern. It looked organized, like someone had built something and then hid it inside the rock. Jake scratched his gray beard. He was 43 years old and had seen many strange things in space. But this felt different. His gut told him this was important. Very important. He put on his work suit and checked the air supply. 2 hours of oxygen. That should be enough to take a look. Jake grabbed his plasma cutter and a small drilling robot. The robot would help him dig through the asteroid's surface. Lucky Strike had mechanical arms that Jake controlled from inside his ship. He used them to position the drilling robot on the asteroid's surface. The little machine started cutting into the rock. Sparks flew in all directions. In space, there was no air to carry sound, so everything happened in silence. After 30 minutes, the robot hit something hard. Jake looked at his scanner again. The metal was just below the surface now. He put the robot away and used the plasma cutter himself. The tool was hot enough to melt through almost anything. When the cutter broke through the rock, Jake saw something that made his heart race. Smooth metal reflected the light from his ship. But this wasn't like any metal he had ever seen. It seemed to move like water, but stayed solid at the same time. Strange symbols covered the surface, glowing with a soft blue light. Jake reached out and touched the metal with his gloved hand. It felt warm, even through his suit. The symbols began to glow brighter when he touched them. Some of them started to move, flowing across the surface like living things. He stepped back quickly. In 15 years of salvage work, Jake had never found anything like this. This wasn't human technology. It wasn't even close to human technology. This had to be alien. Jake's first thought was to call the Colonial Salvage Authority. That's what the rules said he should do. But Jake knew what would happen if he called them. They would take his discovery away. They would give him a small reward and tell him to forget what he saw. The real treasure would go to the big corporations or the government. Jake looked at the alien metal again. The symbols were still moving, still glowing. Whatever this was, it was old. Very old. But it was also still working. That meant it was worth more money than Jake could make in 10 lifetimes. He made his decision. He would explore this himself. If he found something valuable, he would figure out how to sell it later. If he found something dangerous, he could always call for help. Then Jake spent the next 2 hours cutting a bigger hole in the asteroid. The alien metal seemed to go deep into the rock. As he worked, he noticed that the metal wasn't just random pieces. It had shape. It looked like part of a ship, a very big ship. When Jake finished cutting, he had made a hole big enough for a person to climb through. He attached a safety rope to his ship and lowered himself down into the asteroid. His helmet light cut through the darkness below. What Jake saw made him forget to breathe for a moment. He was looking at the side of an enormous spaceship. The hull stretched away in both directions, disappearing into the darkness. This wasn't just a piece of alien technology. This was an entire alien vessel, hidden inside the asteroid for who knew how long. The ship's surface was covered with the moving symbols. They seemed to react to Jake's presence, glowing brighter as he moved along the hall. He found what looked like an airlock, though it was designed very differently from human airlocks. Instead of a round door, this was more like a flower with metal petals. Jake tried to open it, but nothing happened when he pushed or pulled. He was about to give up when he noticed that the symbols around the airlock were changing. They formed new patterns, almost like they were trying to tell him something. On impulse, Jake placed both hands on the largest symbol. The metal felt warm. Again, and suddenly the petals of the airlock began to open. Cool air rushed out, which meant the ship still had atmosphere inside. That should have been impossible after sitting in space for so long. Jake checked his air supply. 1 hour left. Enough time for a quick look inside. He stepped through the airlock, not knowing that he was about to make the most important discovery in human history. The airlock closed behind him with a soft whisper. Jake was now inside an alien spacecraft, completely alone, with no way to call for help if something went wrong. But he wasn't thinking about danger. He was thinking about the adventure that was about to begin. Jake stood inside the alien airlock and tried to understand what he was seeing. The walls around him seemed to curve in ways that hurt his eyes to look at. They bent and twisted like they existed in more than 3 dimensions. His brain couldn't make sense of the geometry. The air inside the ship felt clean and fresh. His suit's sensors showed it was safe to breathe, but Jake kept his helmet on anyway. He didn't trust anything about this situation yet. A soft light appeared in front of him, leading deeper into the ship. Jake followed it carefully, one step at a time. The corridor he walked through was unlike anything humans had ever built. The walls seemed alive, pulsing gently with inner light. Strange plants, or maybe machines, grew from the ceiling, moving slowly like they were underwater. Jake's equipment was going crazy. His scanner beeped constantly, showing readings that made no sense. His compass spun in circles. Even his watch seemed confused, jumping back and forth between different times. After walking for what felt like 10 minutes, Jake reached a large circular room. The ceiling stretched up so high that his light couldn't reach the top. In the center of the room stood several tall, clear containers. They looked like glass pods, but they were filled with a glowing blue liquid. Jake moved closer to examine them. Inside each pod was a figure, not human figures. These beings were tall and thin, much taller than any person Jake had ever seen. Their skin looked pale and seemed to shimmer like starlight. They had long fingers and faces that were beautiful, but strange. Most of the pods were dark and cold. The beings inside looked like they had been dead for a very long time. But one pod, near the center of the room, was different. It glowed brighter than the others, and the liquid inside bubbled gently. The being inside this pod seemed to be sleeping, not dead. As Jake got closer, the being's eyes opened. Jake jumped backward so fast he almost fell over. The creature inside the pod was looking right at him. Its eyes were large and silver, like looking into mirrors that reflected starlight. The being raised one long, graceful hand and placed it against the inside of the pod. The pod began to open with a soft hissing sound. The blue liquid drained away, and the tall being stepped out. She was over 7 feet tall, with skin that seemed to glow from within. She wore robes that moved like they were made of liquid light. Jake reached for his radio to call for help, but then something impossible happened. The alien spoke to him, not with her mouth, but directly into his mind. "Do not fear, small one. I am Vera of the Etherian Collective. I have been waiting for your kind for many thousands of years." Jake's mouth fell open inside his helmet. He could hear her voice as clearly as if she was speaking into his ear, but her lips never moved. Somehow, she was talking directly to his thoughts. "You can hear me," he said out loud, his voice shaking. "Yes, I can understand your language. Your thoughts are simple but clear. You are human, are you not? From the third planet in this system? Jake nodded, not trusting his voice to work properly. Vera smiled, and when she did, Jake felt some of his fear go away. Her smile was kind, like his grandmother's used to be. I have waited so long to meet one of your people. My sensors have been watching your species grow and learn. You have become exactly what we hoped you would become. What do you mean? Jake managed to ask. Vera moved gracefully around the room, her feet barely seeming to touch the floor. My people, the Etherians, have been sleeping in this ship for 50,000 of your years. We were the guardians of this part of the galaxy, protecting younger species from great dangers. But a terrible enemy came, and we were forced to hide. Jake's head was spinning. 50,000 years? This alien had been sleeping inside an asteroid since before humans learned to farm. We hid here and waited, Vera continued. We waited for a species strong enough and clever enough to help us fight the enemy that destroyed our civilization. We have been watching many worlds, many species. Most are too weak or too afraid. Others are too proud or too rigid in their thinking. But humans are different. Different how? Jake asked. Vera turned to look at him, and her silver eyes seemed to see right through him. You are here, are you not? Alone, in a ship you have never seen before, talking to a being from another world. Most creatures would have run away in terror. Others would have called for their military leaders before investigating. But you, Jake Miller, you came to see for yourself. That is why your species may be the answer to our prayers. Jake felt his knees get weak. How did she know his name? Your mind is easy to read, small one. I know your name, your age, your profession. I know about your sister Amy in the Colonial Defense Force, and your friend Pete, who works on Mars. I know you have been alone for most of your adult life, searching the stars for something meaningful. Today, you have found it. Vera walked too. A wall that suddenly became transparent, showing a view of space outside the asteroid. The enemy I spoke of is called the Devourers. They consume entire star systems, eating planets and stars until nothing remains but empty darkness. They move through the galaxy in a pattern, destroying everything in their path. Where are they now? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. They are coming. My calculations show they will reach this part of the galaxy within 50 of your years. Your people's rapid expansion into space has created energy signatures that will attract their attention. They are probably already aware of your species. Jake sat down hard on the floor. This was too much to process. Alien species, ancient enemies, the end of humanity. An hour ago, his biggest worry was finding enough scrap metal to pay for next month's fuel. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Vera knelt down next to him, moving with impossible grace. Because, Jake Miller, you and your people are our last hope. The Devourers have never been defeated. Every species that has faced them has been destroyed or absorbed. But humans have something special. You have the ability to adapt quickly, to think in ways that surprise even yourselves. You have courage that borders on madness and creativity. That defies logic. You think we can beat these Devourers? I think you are the first species in galactic history that might have a chance, but only if you are willing to try. Only if you are willing to learn our technology and fight beside us. Jake looked around the alien ship, at the impossible architecture, and the sleeping forms in the other pods. What would you need from us? First, I need you to help me wake my crew. Then, we must contact your military leaders. Time is shorter than you know, Jake Miller. The Devourers move faster than we calculated. They may already be sending scouts to investigate your worlds. Jake stood up slowly, his decision made. He had come here looking for scrap metal to sell. Instead, he had found the key to humanity's survival or destruction. There was no choice to make, really. He had to help. Okay, he said. Tell me what to do. Over the next 3 hours, Jake helped Vera wake up 6 more Etherians from their sleeping pods. Each time was the same process. Vera would touch symbols on the pod, the blue liquid would drain away, and another tall, graceful being would step out. They all looked similar to Vera, but each had different colored robes and slightly different features. The last Etherian to wake up was clearly their military leader. He was taller than the others and carried himself like a soldier. His robes were dark blue with silver patterns that moved like lightning across the fabric. When he looked at Jake, his silver eyes were cold and suspicious. Commander Vera, why have you awakened us? Is the danger past? His mental voice was deeper than Vera's and more formal. No, Captain Zane. The danger approaches. This human represents the species we have been waiting for, the ones who might be able to help us stop the Devourers. Captain Zane studied Jake, like he was examining a strange insect. This small creature? Vera, surely you cannot be serious. Look at him. He is barely taller than an Etherian child. His technology is primitive. His lifespan is incredibly short. How could such beings stand against the Devourers? Jake felt his face getting red with anger. He might be shorter than these aliens, but he didn't like being talked about like he wasn't there. Hey, I'm standing right here. And humans might be small, but we're tougher than we look. Captain Zane's eyebrows went up in surprise. It speaks directly instead of through thought sharing? How crude. Crude maybe, but effective, Vera said gently. Captain, you must learn to see beyond physical appearance. This human found our ship, solved our entry puzzle, and chose to investigate alone. That shows exactly the kind of thinking we need. Jake decided it was time to take control of the conversation. Look, I don't understand everything that's happening here. But if these Devourers are as dangerous as you say, we need to contact Earth immediately. My sister Amy is in the Colonial Defense Force. She can get us to the right people. Vera nodded. That would be wise. But first, you must understand what we are truly facing. She led Jake and the other Etherians to another part of the ship. This room was filled with floating displays that showed star maps and images. Vera touched one of the displays, and it showed a view of space that made Jake's stomach turn. Where? There should have been stars and planets. There was only darkness. Empty black space stretched for light years in every direction. This was the Andalon system, Vera explained. 7 planets, 3 of them with intelligent life. The Devourers reached it 2,000 years ago. This is what remains. The display changed to show something that looked like a massive black cloud moving through space. But as Jake looked closer, he could see it wasn't a cloud at all. It was made up of millions of individual creatures, each one the size of a small moon. They moved together like a swarm of insects, but insects that could eat planets. The Devourers reproduce by consuming matter and energy, Captain Zane explained, his mental voice grim. They start with the outer planets of a system, then work their way inward. They can drain a star in less than a year. When they finish with a system, they divide and move on to the next target. Jake watched in horror as the display showed the Devourers surrounding a planet. The world's surface glowed as it was consumed. And then there was nothing left but empty space. How do you fight something like that? Jake asked. That is what we never learned, Vera admitted. My people were advanced. We had weapons that could manipulate space and time. We had ships that could travel between dimensions. But the Devourers adapted to everything we used against them. In the end, we could only run and hide. But you think humans can do better? We think humans can do something we could not. You can think in ways that make no logical sense. You take risks that should destroy you, but somehow lead to victory instead. The Devourers are a hive mind. They think in patterns. You might be unpredictable enough to confuse them. Jake stared at the empty space where a solar system used to be. We need to call Earth now. Vera agreed. She led Jake back to his ship while the other Etherians began working on their own vessel systems. Jake's hands shook as he set up the communications equipment. This was the most important call in human history, and he had to make it. The signal took several minutes to reach Earth. When it connected, Jake found himself talking to his sister Amy. She was at a defense base on Luna, Earth's moon. Jake? What? Are you doing calling on military channels? And why do you look so scared? Jake took a deep breath. Amy, I need you to listen very carefully. Don't ask questions until I'm finished. Get Admiral Morrison and any other high-ranking officers you can find. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but it's all true. For the next 20 minutes, Jake explained everything. He told Amy about finding the alien ship, meeting Vera, and learning about the Devourers. Amy's expression changed from confused to skeptical to terrified as Jake talked. When Jake finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Amy spoke. Jake, if this is some kind of joke, ... It's not a joke. Jake turned his communicator so Amy could see Vera standing behind him. Amy Miller, meet Commander Vera of the Etherian Collective. Amy's face went pale as Vera stepped into view. Greetings, Amy Miller. Your brother speaks the truth. The Devourers will reach your solar system in approximately 50 Earth years. We must begin preparations immediately. Within 6 hours, Jake's salvage ship was surrounded by Colonial Defense Force vessels. Admiral Kate Morrison herself came to see the alien ship. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had fought in 3 different wars. Jake thought nothing could surprise her, but her jaw dropped when she met Vera. The next few days were chaos. Scientists, military officers, and politicians all wanted to see the Etherians. Some people refused to believe the threat was real. Others wanted to surrender immediately. But Admiral Morrison and a group of other leaders decided that humanity would stand and fight. We've never backed down from a challenge before, Admiral Morrison told the Emergency Council. We're not going to start now. Jake found himself appointed as the official liaison between humans and Etherians. It was a job he never wanted and wasn't qualified for, but Vera insisted that he was the right person. You understand both sides, she explained. You think like a human but can communicate with us. That makes you invaluable. Pete Santos, Jake's old friend from Mars, arrived a week later with a team of engineers. Pete was a big man with calloused hands and a brilliant mind for machinery. When he saw the Etherian technology, his eyes lit up like a child seeing his first spaceship. Jake, this is incredible. Look at these power systems. They're drawing energy from dimensions we can't even detect. And these weapons, they don't just shoot at targets. They actually bend space around them. Vera explained that they would need to combine human engineering with Etherian technology. Your ships are crude, but sturdy. Our technology is advanced, but requires minds that can think in multiple dimensions. Together, we might create something that can stand against the Devourers. As Pete and his team began working with the Etherian engineers, Jake got another piece of bad news. Long-range sensors had detected something moving in the empty space between galaxies. Something big. Something that was headed their way. They're coming faster than we thought, Vera told him privately. We have perhaps 30 Earth years, not 50. We must work quickly. Jake looked out at the stars and wondered if humanity was about to face its greatest challenge or its final defeat. Either way, there was no turning back now. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin. 2 years had passed since Jake found the Etherian ship. In that time, the human world had changed completely. Some people called it the Great Preparation. Others called it the beginning of the end. Jake stood on the observation deck of the new Mars Defense Station, watching hundreds of ships being built in the orbital shipyards below. These weren't normal human ships. They were hybrids, combining human engineering with Etherian technology in ways that both species were still learning to understand. The fusion drives are working better than expected, Pete Santos said, joining. Jake at the window. Pete looked tired. He had been working 18-hour days for months, trying to integrate alien technology with human systems. We can now build ships that travel 3 times faster than anything we had before. Jake nodded, but his mind was on other problems. How many ships have we lost in testing? Pete's face darkened. 17 so far. The Etherian neural interface. Systems are difficult for human minds to handle. Some pilots can adapt to thinking in multiple dimensions. Others ... He didn't finish the sentence. Jake knew what Pete meant. They had lost good people trying to operate the hybrid ships. The Etherian technology required a different way of thinking, one that some humans couldn't learn without damaging their minds. It was a horrible price to pay, but they had no choice. Admiral Morrison's voice came over the station's communication system. All department heads to the main briefing room. Priority Alpha. Jake and Pete made their way through the corridors of the defense station. The place was always busy now, with humans and Etherians working side by side. It still felt strange to see the tall, graceful aliens walking among human engineers and soldiers. Some humans had adapted well to working with the Etherians. Others still seemed uncomfortable around them. The briefing room was packed with military officers, scientists, and engineers. Admiral Morrison stood at the front, looking grim. Next to her stood Commander Vera and Captain Zane. Behind them, a large display showed a map of local space. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Morrison began, "we have a problem. Our long-range sensors have detected Devourer scout ships in the Proxima Centauri system. They're 3 years ahead of schedule." The room erupted in worried voices. Jake felt his stomach drop. Proxima Centauri was only 4 light years from Earth. If the Devourers were there already, humanity had much less time than they thought. Captain Zane stepped forward, his mental voice reaching everyone in the room. "The scouts are smaller than the main swarm, but they are still dangerous. Each scout ship is approximately the size of your moon. They will study this area of space and report back to the main force." "How long do we have?" asked General Barnes, the head of Colonial Defense. Vera answered, her mental voice sad. "If the scouts report favorable conditions, the main swarm will arrive within 5 years. If we can destroy the scouts before they report back, we might have 10 years. Admiral Morrison pointed to the star map. "Operation Clean Sweep begins in 6 months. We're going to take every hybrid ship we have and hit the Proxima system hard. We have to destroy those scouts." Jake raised his hand. "Admiral, how many hybrid ships do we have that are actually ready for combat?" 43, Morrison replied, "with more coming online every month." "And how many scout ships are in the Proxima system?" Captain Zane answered grimly. "Our sensors show at least 12, possibly more." The math was not encouraging. Even with their new technology, humanity was badly outnumbered. But Jake had learned something about humans over the past 2 years. They were at their best when the odds were against them. After the briefing, Jake went to visit his sister Amy. She was now a captain in the Colonial Defense Force, commanding one of the new hybrid cruisers. Her ship, the Defiant, was docked at the station for final equipment checks. Jake found Amy in her quarters, studying tactical manuals and Etherian combat techniques. She looked up when he entered, and Jake saw the stress in her eyes. "Scared?" he asked, sitting down across from her. Amy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Terrified." "Jake, I've been training with this new technology for 2 years, and I still don't really understand how it works. The neural interface feels like having someone else's thoughts mixed up with your own. And now we're supposed to use it to fight creatures that have destroyed entire civilizations." Jake reached across and squeezed his sister's hand. "You're one of the best pilots in the fleet, Amy. If anyone can make this work, it's you. I hope you're right. Because if we fail at Proxima, Earth is next." Over the next few months, Jake watched the final preparations for Operation Clean Sweep. The hybrid ships were loaded with new weapons that bent space and time. The crews trained constantly, learning to work with technology that challenged everything. They thought they knew about physics. Jake's role had evolved, too. He was no longer just a liaison between humans and Etherians. He had become something like a translator, helping both species understand each other's ways of thinking. It was harder than it sounded. Humans thought in straight lines and clear categories. Etherians thought in curves and possibilities. 3 weeks before the operation was scheduled to begin, Jake got devastating news. Vera found him in his quarters late one night, her silver eyes filled with worry. "Jake, I must tell you something. Our deep space sensors have detected movement beyond Proxima Centauri. The main Devourer swarm is not where our calculations predicted." "Where is it?" "It is much closer, and it is much larger than we thought. Jake, the swarm that destroyed my people was only a small part of the Devourer's total force. What is coming toward your galaxy is 10 times larger." Jake sat down hard on his bed. "How much time do we really have? If we cannot stop the scouts at Proxima, perhaps 2 years before the main force arrives. And Jake, there is something else. The scouts have been sending signals back toward the main swarm. They may have already reported the location of Earth." Jake stared out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, an enemy beyond imagination was heading toward everything humanity had ever known. Their new ships and weapons might not be enough. Their courage and determination might not be enough. But they had to try anyway. "Vera, do you really think we have a chance?" The Etherian commander was quiet for a long moment. "I think, Jake Miller, that your species has something mine never had. You fight hardest when you have the most to lose. The Devourers have never faced anything like human desperation." "I hope that's enough." "So do I, small friend. So do I." The next morning, Jake received orders that surprised him. Admiral Morrison wanted him to join the Proxima mission as an observer aboard Amy's ship. "You understand both human and Etherian thinking better than anyone," the Admiral explained. "If something goes wrong, you might be the key to finding a solution." Jake had never been in a space battle before. He was a salvage operator, not a soldier, but he had started this whole situation by finding the Etherian ship. It seemed fitting that he should be there when humanity made its first stand against the DEVOURERS. As he packed his gear, Jake thought about how much his life had changed. 2 years ago, he was a lonely man scraping a living from asteroid debris. Now he was about to join the most important military mission in human history. He wondered if he would live to see how it all ended. The Defiant launched 3 days later, along with the rest of the human Etherian fleet, as Earth fell away behind. Then Jake realized that this might be the last time he ever saw his home world. If they failed at Proxima Centauri, there might not be a home to return to. The journey to Proxima Centauri took 8 days with the new hybrid drives. Jake spent most of the trip learning how to use the ship's emergency systems and trying not to think about what they would find when they arrived. The crew of the Defiant was tense but determined. They all knew this mission would decide humanity's future. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima system, Jake got his first look at the enemy. The Devourer scouts were even more terrifying then. The recordings Vera had shown him. Each one was a living mountain of black flesh and metal, easily the size of Earth's moon. They moved through space like giant sea creatures, their surfaces rippling with energy that made reality itself seem to bend around them. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Collins, the ship's sensor operator. "How are we supposed to fight something like that?" Amy's voice was steady over the ship's communication system. "All ships, this is Captain Miller. Remember your training. These things are big, but that makes them slow. We're faster and smarter. Stick to the plan, and we'll get through this." The plan was simple, at least in theory. The human Etherian fleet would split into small groups and attack the scouts from multiple directions at once. The hybrid ship's dimensional weapons should be able to damage the Devourers in ways they couldn't adapt to quickly, but plans never survive contact with the Yuff. Enemy. The first group of human ships opened fire with their new weapons. Beams of twisted space-time struck the nearest Devourer scout, and for a moment, Jake thought they might actually win easily. The creature's surface rippled, and parts of it seemed to fold in on themselves. Then the scout fought back. A wave of pure darkness spread out from the creature like a living shadow. When it touched the human ships, their shields failed, and their hull plating began to dissolve. 2 cruisers were destroyed in seconds, their crews lost before they could even send distress signals. "All ships scatter," Amy commanded. "Pattern Gamma, now." The fleet broke apart, each ship heading in a different direction. Jake watched through the Defiance viewports as the battle turned into chaos. The Devourer scouts were slow to move, but their weapons could reach across millions of miles. Wherever the darkness touched, human ships died, but the humans adapted quickly. Captain Torres in the cruiser Valiant discovered that the dimensional shields worked better if they were constantly moving and changing frequency. Commander Kim found that rapid, random course changes made it harder for the Devourers to target her ship. Jake watched his sister work with the Etherian neural interface. Her mind connected to the ship's systems in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Amy's thoughts controlled the ship's weapons, while her conscious mind handled tactics and strategy. It was like watching someone conduct a deadly orchestra. "Jake, get down to engineering," Amy called over the intercom. "Pete needs help with the weapon systems." Jake ran through corridors that shook with each impact against the ship's shields. He found Pete in the engineering section, working frantically, with cables and components that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. "Jake, thank God you're here. The Etherian weapons are overloading our power systems. I need you to help me reroute the energy flow." Jake grabbed tools and followed Pete's instructions. Around them, the ship's hybrid technology hummed and sparked as it pushed beyond its design limits. Through the engineering section's windows, Jake could see other human ships fighting desperately against the massive scout creatures. "Pete, are we winning?" "I don't know. We've damaged 3 of the scouts, but we've lost 8 ships. The math isn't good." As if to prove his point, another human cruiser exploded in the distance, consumed by the Devourer's darkness. Then Jake had an idea. It was crazy and dangerous, and probably impossible. But it was exactly the kind of idea that Vera said humans were good at. "Pete, what would happen if we overloaded the dimensional drive while we were inside one of those creatures?" Pete stared at him. "You'd tear a hole in space-time. The explosion would probably destroy everything within 1,000,000 miles, including us." "But it would definitely kill the scout?" "Oh, it would kill the scout. It would kill everything nearby." "Jake, are you seriously suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we ram one of those things with our drives set to overload. It's suicide, but it might take out multiple scouts at once." Pete was quiet for a moment, thinking through the physics. It's insane, but it might work. The dimensional cascade would spread through their organic systems faster than they could adapt. Jake grabbed the ship's intercom. "Amy, I need to talk to you privately. Right now." 5 minutes later, Amy arrived in engineering, her face grim from the neural interface connection. Jake explained his plan quickly. Amy listened without interrupting, her expression getting more worried with each word. "Jake, that's suicide." "Maybe. But if we don't do something drastic, we're going to lose this battle anyway. And if we lose here, Earth is next." Amy looked at Pete, who nodded slowly. "The physics work. It would definitely destroy the Scout. But we'd die in the process." Amy finished. "Jake, I can't ask my crew to sacrifice themselves." "You're not asking. I am. Amy, this is why I'm here. Vera said humans fight differently than other species. We take risks that seem impossible. This is our chance to prove her right." Amy was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sounds of battle around them. Another human ship's distress signal cut off abruptly. They were running out of time and options. "All right," Amy said finally. "If we're going to do this, we do it right. Pete, how long do you need to modify the drive?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. You have 5. Jake, get on the comm and explain the plan to Admiral Morrison. If she approves, we go." Admiral Morrison's response was immediate. "Captain Miller, that's the craziest plan I've ever heard. Do it." Pete worked frantically to modify the dimensional drive, while Amy positioned the Defiant for its final attack. Jake helped where he could, but mostly he just tried to stay out of the way. Through the ship's sensors, he could see the largest devourer. Scout ahead of them, its surface writhing with dark energy. "Drive modifications complete," Pete announced. "We have maybe 60 seconds from activation to cascade failure." "That's enough time," Amy said. "Jake, Pete, it's been an honor serving with you." The Defiant accelerated toward the Devourer Scout at maximum speed. The creature seemed to notice their approach and began charging its weapons. Bolts of darkness shot past the ship as Amy used every trick she had learned to avoid being hit. 30 seconds to impact, Amy called out. Jake grabbed onto a support beam as the ship shook under enemy fire. Through the viewport, the Devourer Scout grew larger and larger until it filled their entire view. Its surface was covered with what looked like eyes, all of them focused on the tiny human ship rushing toward it. 10 seconds. Activating drive. Overload. The ship's lights flickered as enormous energies built up in the dimensional drive. Jake felt reality itself starting to bend around them. The Devourer Scout tried to move away, but it was too late. The Defiant struck the creature's surface and disappeared inside its flesh. For a moment, everything was dark and quiet. Then the universe exploded. Jake felt himself being torn apart and put back together at the same time. Reality twisted in directions that didn't have names. The Devourer Scout screamed across dimensions as the dimensional cascade spread through its body. When the light faded, Jake found himself floating in an escape pod with Amy and Pete. Somehow, the ship's emergency systems had managed to eject them just before the cascade reached critical failure. Around them, empty space stretched where the Devourer Scout used to be, but they had done more than just destroy one enemy. The dimensional explosion had created a chain reaction, damaging 2 other scouts and scaring the rest badly enough that they began retreating toward the edge of the system. This is Admiral Morrison to all ships. The enemy is withdrawing. Repeat, the Devourers are withdrawing. Mission accomplished. As rescue ships arrived to pick up the survivors, Jake looked out at the stars and realized something important. Those Devourers had been defeated. Not completely, and not permanently, but for the first time in galactic history, they had been forced to retreat. Jake, Vera's mental voice reached him across space, transmitted from her ship in the fleet. "You have done something remarkable. The scouts are fleeing, but more importantly, they are confused. Your attack method was so illogical that their hive mind cannot understand it. They will hesitate before attacking again. How long do we have? Perhaps 5 years before the main swarm arrives. But Jake, what you proved today is more valuable than time. You proved that the Devourers can be defeated. Your species has given the galaxy hope for the first time in millions of years." As Jake's rescue pod was brought aboard Admiral Morrison's flagship, he thought about the future. The war was far from over. The main Devourer swarm was still coming, and it would be far larger and more dangerous than the scouts. They had just fought, but humans had proven something important today. They had shown that courage and crazy ideas could overcome even the most terrifying enemies. Jake thought about his old life as a salvage operator, picking through space debris to make a living. Now he was part of the greatest adventure in human history. The Devourers were coming, but humanity would be ready. And Jake Miller, the lonely salvager who had started it all by investigating a strange